Long before Rudyard Kipling ever put pen to paper and brought his wolf boy Mowgli to life, or Tarzan grasped his first vine to swing across our TV screens, the world has been fascinated by feral children. The idea of the wild child struck Western culture to its core and hasn't released its grip on us since, but these characters are a world away from the reality of growing up in isolation. In the next several minutes, I will attempt to illustrate the reasons behind our fascination with feral children and to show the stark contrast between fact and fiction. A feral child is the colloquial term for someone who has, from a very young age, been deprived of contact with other human beings. This isolation manifests itself in many ways. Chief among them is a complete lack of culture. According to Benedict and Mead, culture is not inherent within all of us, but is instead absorbed over time by way of social contact during our formative years. The isolation experienced by most of the children we would classify as feral is extreme. Many grew up in complete sensory deprivation or without any human contact from the time they could walk. This is a far cry from the romanticized version we see in film and literature. There is almost always some substitute parental figure seeing to the child's safety and comfort. Mowgli had his wolves, the Lost Boys had Pan, and Tarzan had his apes. The children are well fed, moderately clean, and free from grievous injury. This illustration leads back to the Romantic period in literature, when there was a push for mankind to return to a more natural state in response to the boom of the Industrial Revolution. Tales of children growing up free from the constraints of a rapidly changing society would have no doubt been extremely appealing to the Romantics, and it is perhaps due in part to the popularization of such tales that the Western world became so enthralled by the wild child. Cases of feral children had been part of folklore for centuries. Rome was allegedly founded by twin brothers Romulus and Remus, who were abandoned by their family and raised by wolves. But little was understood about the real-life wild child. Linnaeus even went so far as to suggest that they were a subspecies of Homo sapiens that he dubbed Homo ferus. It is not surprising, then, that when a case presented itself in France in 1800, people were not sure what to make of the child. In one of the first documented cases of a feral child, Victor of Aveyron had been isolated from other people for the majority of his life. It was estimated that he had been separated from his family since he could walk. His body was marred with cuts, bruises, and deep scars, all evidence of his hard life in the wild. The French philosopher Rousseau discussed the natural man as someone removed from the confines of society, who enjoyed freedom unlike any other person, specifically because he was not part of a society. It was after Rousseau's publication of The Natural Man that Victor of Aveyron was found, and this philosophical writing informed the discussion of how to care for the boy. His behavior was the first to be scientifically documented. His caretakers tried in vain to teach him language and culture. He seemed apathetic at best, volatile at worst. The only time Victor was ever responsive was when he was fed. People seemed unimportant to him, except that they were the purveyors of sustenance. He did not identify with them at all, did not sympathize with them, and showed no recollection of any previous kindness they had shown him. A more recent case involving a girl dubbed Jeannie occurred right in our own backyard in a Los Angeles suburb. Jeannie was kept locked in a closet, strapped to a toilet chair for most of her 13 years of life. Her only contact with her parents came when they fed her sparingly and replaced the bucket that held her waist. When she was eventually found by the authorities, her muscles were so atrophied that she was unable to walk or even stand. She could not eat solid food or control her bowels, and she weighed only 62 pounds. Furthermore, she was unable to speak. The cases of Victor and Jeannie occurred 2 centuries apart. The fact that feral children are so rare is exactly why we find them so fascinating. We do not often get a glimpse into the raw human psyche. The inner workings of our minds are shaped by our interactions with others, so it is interesting from a scientific perspective to have the chance to study someone removed from that process. Some experts believe that there is a correlation between a lack of socialization and certain autism spectrum disorders. Victor's discomfort around other people and his extreme singular interests are characteristic symptoms of Asperger's syndrome. Both Jeannie and Victor had difficulty learning language. Jeannie gained a small vocabulary but later regressed after a trauma, and Victor was never able to communicate effectively at all. It was because of cases like Victor's that the theory of a critical period for language acquisition emerged. Essentially, it is impossible to learn a language before the age of 2 because our brains are not physiologically developed enough. But after puberty, because our brains have matured, if we have not been exposed to language, it is impossible to learn because all of our higher functions are set and neural plasticity is lost. Cases of feral children provide scientists with a rare opportunity to study some of our biggest questions about human nature and the impact of socialization on development. How much of who we are is determined by genetics, and how much of it is based on our interaction with others? Are culture and language inherent within us? How far removed from the animal kingdom are we really? These are questions that we as humans are prone to asking and that science is incapable of testing in a laboratory. As unfortunate as these cases may be, it is important to note that they have not been in vain. Studies of feral children have led to breakthroughs in education and therapy for children with learning disabilities and certain autism spectrum disorders. So while Peter Pan may steal our hearts as quickly as he stole Hook's hand, let's not forget that real scientific achievement is better than any fantasy. Thank you.